The book is literally written to be a resource for your briefs. It's good for the rules of engagement, particularly if you're a lawyer who's never had the opportunity to study the rules, because they clearly wouldn't do that in law school. 30b-6, they spend 30, 40 seconds on. Deposition misconduct, nothing, nada. And this is something that we get in everyday practice. I mean, if you want to tell a story about being jerked around in a deposition, all you've had to do is take one deposition and you'll have a war story. And so it's become a way of life in our practice. And it's really kind of, it really irritates me because it raises the blood pressure and it makes you angry. And what we've done in this methodology that frankly we developed at the Advanced Deposition College in New Orleans, which is where I met Jay, we figured out how do we deal with this within the law. And I got to tell you, this is a very different paradigm. And a lot of times when I give this talk, I get a pushback from people who say, well, that's not the way I do it. I said, you don't have to do it this way. But I will tell you that if you know the rules of engagement and you use them, and when they just start jerking you around, instead of getting sucked into the vortex, you just say, we're going to let someone else decide. They're going to hurt themselves. So what hope is that all of our listeners today just say, look, this is just a different approach. Not saying it's the right approach. It's not the wrong approach. I can tell you that the practice of law is a lot more fun if it's not all about everybody yelling at each other and letting them hurt themselves. So what we'll do in this talk is identify the problem that everybody already knows. I'll share a metaphor as to why you might think it would work. And then we're going to go through the case law and some techniques to show you how you can bring the temperature down, have more fun, and sometimes, you might be fortunate enough to get a big sanction. I mean, Pat Malone did it, and he got a $45,000 sanction in Maryland, and Dusty Harvey did it down in New Mexico and got I believe it was either a $20,000 or $25,000 sanction. But to get sanctions like that, the other side has to be really bad. And so the key is, we'll talk today about how to show the court how bad they are.
Sounds like a great plan.
And what we'll do, Mark, is if anyone has any questions, like we've done previous programs, make sure you put it in the Q&A, not the chat. Put in the Q&A, I'll monitor it. Some I'll answer on the fly, typing an answer back. Some I'll interrupt Mark, and if it's something timely that we're talking about, we'll kind of cover that and kind of go from there and give some examples along the way. So this should be something everyone can use in their practice, and excited to get into this one.
All right. So the coupon code's not working. So it's MK10OFF capital. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I've hopefully they took the little apostrophes off. It should be in M as in Mary, K as in cat, 10 OFF.
All right. Shall I take the screen, or do you have some other things you need to show first?
No, you can take the screen. I'll show them later.
All right.
And then while he's doing this, Dan, someone asked, if it's not available for replay, it will be available on Trial Lawyers University, correct?
Yes. It will be available on Trial Lawyers
Perfect.
tomorrow.
Perfect. Someone had asked that.
All right. Should we roll?
Let's go, baby. Let's do it.
Okay. Well, friends, today I'm going to talk about dealing with deposition obstruction. And this is an alternative strategy. And as I said a few moments ago, sometimes I get pushback from people. They say, well, the way I do it is this, and, it works for me. And if things are working for you, great. But if you just kind of open your minds and your hearts for the next hour and listen to an alternative way to deal with it, you might find that it'll bring your blood pressure down. It'll bring professionalism to your practice, and the courts actually really respect what we do here. So let's kind of get right into it. Rambo litigators, you know what we're talking about. There's someone yelling at you, they're interrupting your questions, they're misinterpreting, they're threatening you with calls with the court. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I was doing a case in Chicago where this is where this whole process started maybe 20 years ago, where I literally had an objection to every single question, including, please state your name. Objection, vague, first or last. I mean, it was unbelievable. Every single question, and I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was, I had brown hair back then. It was, how do you deal with this? And that was kind of the way of life. Continues to be the way of life, but not as bad. And once I've started implementing the process I'm talking to you about, I found that lawyers find out and they back off because they don't want to get spanked. Because the classic way that we as a group of alpha lawyers respond to a Rambo litigator is the haka. You're not going to push me around. I'm a trial lawyer. Nobody's going to talk to me like that. I demand respect. I'm going to fight back. I'm strong. And, God knows, not only did I used to do that, I was taught to do that. And one of the things I started to realize is, does it do anything other than make me feel, good that I'm a tough guy? Because in the end, this is all about getting evidence. So I'm going to share a clip with you right now that's been edited down from 9 minutes to about a minute, minute and a half, and ask yourself the question, what was accomplished?
Do you know what speaking objections are?
Don't lecture me, idiot. I'm telling you, I'm not gonna let that happen. Okay? You got me? Do we understand each other? Are we connecting here? Because if we're not connecting here, I will try again. Okay? Don't give me local rules, don't give me procedures, don't give me professionalism. Just put a fair question to the witness. And if you're not gonna do that, then I am. Understand each other?
If you believe that a question that I ask is not proper, then you get to pose a valid objection. You're not allowed to make speaking objections. You're not allowed to give.
Don't lecture me, puppy. Don't lecture me. I was doing this when you were still chasing cheerleaders.
The guy's a jerk. And a lot of people will say, God, good for that young lawyer. He stood up to that bully. And I say, yeah, I'm sure, he felt good that he could calmly stand up to the bully. But the question is, how much evidence was generated? Did the witness answer even one question? And of course, this would go on throughout the entire deposition, because the whole purpose of that kind of bullying is to get the questioning lawyer off their game, to have them lose their mojo, to break up the record. And it's also, our profession is populated by a lot of people who just are bullies. And so the question that we raised at the Deposition College is there a different approach to this standing up, telling them who you are, handing them copies of the cases, trying to, force yourself to bludgeon them into acting the way you want them to act. And one of the things that we came up with was the concept of the slugger versus the strategist. And this is a metaphor to think about as we're going forward through this talk. Way back in 1974, there was a rumble in the jungle. George Foreman was the world heavyweight champion. And Muhammad Ali, the former heavyweight champion, wanted to do a comeback and go after Foreman. But Foreman was a decade younger than him. He was stronger, he was fit, he was undefeated. And everybody said, Ali doesn't have a chance. The slugger is gonna knock him out. Well, what Ali did is he did the rope-a-dope. For 7 rounds, he went into the corner. He taunted Foreman. He dodged him, and he let Foreman swing himself out. And everybody throughout this first 7 rounds are saying, God, Ali is a has-been. He hasn't even landed a punch. You know, this is a joke. And in the 7th round, boom, he came out and knocked out Foreman with a single punch because Foreman was worn out. Foreman had hurt himself. And so the strategy outsmarted the slugger. So what I would pose this question to you, are you playing chess? Or are you playing checkers? Checkers is just trying to get whatever you can as you're going along as fast as you can. Chess is outsmarting the adversary and taking them in at the end. And I think litigation and trial work is much more like chess, that we have to outsmart them, not outbully them. And so what I'd suggest to you is consider not getting sucked into the vortex, not engaging with the adversary at all. You know, they don't exist, they're gnats. And in the end, ignore them completely. Don't even acknowledge what the adversary is doing in trying to screw with you. And what will happen is you will let them hurt themselves. You say, how does that work? Say, have this picture in your mind, the transcript. Every time your adversary says anything in the transcript and you don't respond, you're going to highlight it. If you're under 40, you'll do it digitally. If you know your Dan's age, you'll have the little thing you just draw on there. But think about this.
Just so you know, Mark, I am watching, just so you know that.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to make sure that I had you in the game here, you know?
I'm in the game.
So now you look at this, and if the judge sees this, he sees what the defense lawyer is doing. Now, if you're lecturing and you're talking, then the defense lawyer can do the same thing and highlight where you're talking. So the idea is to take to the ropes. And you're gonna say, well, you know, I got to get my stuff. I got to get the answer to my question. Says, you will. You know, patience is a virtue. But remember, we're playing the long game, and you're probably going to have more than one deposition in the case. And you're probably going to see the same defense lawyer over and over and over again. So this methodology is similar to training the dog that pisses on your carpet. You got to roll up the newspaper and whack them on the nose once in a while to teach them that this is not going to be a good thing. So what you want to do in this alternative approach is to get a good night's sleep, ramp up your Prozac, and sit on your hands and just keep pushing. And the more they object, the better off you'll be. Now, some of you are going to say, this is BS. I'm just going to sign off now. At the end of this talk, you will see how it's all pulled together. But to know what to highlight, you have to know what the rules of engagement are. So we are going to talk about what the rules of deposition engagement are. What is your adversary allowed to do, or what is anybody allowed to do in a deposition? And so the thing I would ask you to keep in your mind is we're going to look at this deposition obstruction process through 2 lenses. The first lens is this something that can be done in court, in front of a judge and in front of a jury? If your adversary can't do it in open court, they can't do it in the deposition. You're going to get lots of case law now that is all laid out in the book to show you, you know, what are the rules to show the court in a motion. But the long and the short of it is, you already know you can't do it. If you can't do it in court, you can't do it in the depo. And you know what you can't do in court. And I just saw the pop up, and scope of this deposition will come up in the notice or about 20 minutes from now. So the other thing, can this happen in court is this a problem that is fixable? And we need to deal with that. So let's take them one at a time. The first half of what we're going to talk about is, can it happen in court? The rule in the federal rules, and virtually every state follows this, is examination and cross-examination of a deponent proceeds just as it would at trial. Therefore, in your head, is this conduct permissible at trial? So let's go through what's prohibited conduct first. Well, first of all, this is an ethics rule. 33.4A of the model rules, almost every state follows it. And this is ignored almost universally in the litigation practice. But the ethics rule makes it really clear that a lawyer shall not unlawfully obstruct another party's access to evidence. And of course, you know, those junior partners are going to say, there's no statute that says it's a crime to, you know, object during the deposition. I have a duty to zealously advocate on my client's interest. Well, maybe they ought to read the comments, because it is expressly prohibited to involve in obstructive tactics in discovery procedure, which means following the rules of civil procedure. Now, I'm going to tell you that, you know, most ethics boards don't deal with this, although the Supreme Court of Delaware has commented on it. So obstruction is unethical. And so we need to look at what are the different types of obstruction and how do things, what's the jurisprudence that falls with that? Well, tactical disruptions, that's what this is really all about. It's all about getting you off your mojo. It's off, you know, getting the witness feeling that, you know, the lawyer is going to be defending them and helping them not, you know, step on themselves. Well, tactical disruptions are prohibited. In re Stratosphere is one of about 3 or 4 really big cases here, but comes right out and says it is a prohibited practice to be involved in ramble litigation, which interferes with or disrupts the orderly flow of the deposition. I mean, people don't sit and yell at you at trial. I object, you can't ask that question, you know, move on, counsel. None of that is allowed in the courtroom. The judge will do it. The lawyer doesn't have the right. So tactical disruptions and interruptions are prohibited and cannot be done. Well, you know, but a lot of lawyers will say, well, I've got a duty to the court system to make sure there's a clean record. Well, those of you who remember the Iran-Contra hearings when Brandon Sullivan was representing Oliver North during the hearings in front of the Senate, and he would just literally tell him what to answer on every question. And when he was called out on it, he goes, I'm not a potted plant. I got news for you. Under the rules of civil procedure, once the deposition starts, you are. Lawyers are not intermediaries. And this is, the case law goes right down to 1993, Hall versus Clifton, which is the landmark case that's followed everywhere in the country except for one little part that we'll talk about in a bit. And the court said there is no proper need for a lawyer to act as an intermediary, interpreting questions or deciding which questions the witness should answer. Lawyer has no right to do that. I mean, can you imagine that in the courtroom? A lawyer just telling his client on the witness stand what they can and cannot answer, or reinterpreting? That doesn't work. And lawyers,
Mark, the back on Hall v. Clifton, I mean, I remember I was a baby lawyer in a case up in Ohio, and I was taking a depo, and a lawyer was being majorly obstructionist, was objection not relevant, don't answer, instructed not to answer the whole time. And it was after 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I wasn't really arguing with him. We were trying to get the judge on the phone, but in Cincinnati, a lot of times the judges they leave at like 3:30 or 4, so couldn't get the judge on the phone. So filed a motion and just basically cited Hall v. Clifton. I remember going to the hearing and made the argument, and the other lawyers, opposing lawyers, argument with the judge was, Judge, it just wasn't relevant. And she's like, counselor, that's my job as judge to determine what is and isn't relevant, not yours. And so she ordered that we got to retake the depo at their cost and all this stuff. And then my law partner recently used Hall v. Clifton, and a judge in a case we have pending now, basically, didn't sanction the lawyer, but basically said no speaking objections, you can't be instructed not to answer, and ordered that we could retake 2 depots at the defense cost. So it's a great case. If you haven't used it, it's a great case. And the case does all the talking for you. It's really good.
You're going to see quotes from it, but that's exactly it. The judge says, it's my job to rule on this stuff. Lawyers don't get to rule on their own objections. Maybe if you went to an Ivy League school and you think you can, there is no jurisprudence anywhere that says a lawyer gets to rule on their own objections. It doesn't work that way. It just seems to be a method of practice that they seem to think they can get away with. So I'm glad for that story, because Hall is a great case. Hall went on to say, and is exactly, you notice these are quotation marks, counsel are not permitted to state on the record their interpretations of the questions, since their interpretations are irrelevant. Lawyers can't rephrase the question you're asking. You're asking the questions, however they interpret it doesn't mean anything. And whether or not that adversary lawyer understands or pretends to understand the question really doesn't make any difference, because a lawyer's purported, and the judge in Hall got it, purported lack of understanding is not a reason to interrupt a question. It doesn't work that way, because you see, it's the witness who has the duty to ask. If a witness doesn't get the question, they're supposed to tell you. And Cincinnati Insurance versus Serrano, which is a super case that deals with speaking objections, which I'll go into it a lot more when I get to the speaking objection part, is only a witness knows whether or not they understand a question or not, because lawyers pretend to not understand questions that are just crazy. I was doing a case in Atlanta with the great Lance Laurie, and I was helping him out on some corporate stuff, and we were taking 30B6s, and I asked the question, so what were the profits of the company? And the defense lawyer goes, well, objection vague, I don't understand what you mean by profits. And so tell me, Jay, what do you think the witness said at that point?
What a profit was?
Yeah, I mean, and we went through a whole series of questions to spank her for that ridiculous comment. Did you go to college? Yes. Did you make it in 4 years? Yeah. Law school, because she was in general counsel. Yeah. 3 more years. Yeah. So in that 7 years of higher education, did you ever hear the word profit? Well, yeah. Well, did you know what it meant, or did you have to look it up in the dictionary? Okay, what do you think it meant? Go ahead and answer what you think it meant. And that was kind of the last time he did that. But rather than arguing with him, we just let him know, don't ask stupid questions or make stupid objections.
Right. I switched my headsets and people said the volume was too loud. So hopefully this is better.
What's that?
I said took my headset off. People said it was too loud. So hopefully this audio is better.
Yeah, but you look like a talk show host when you wear it, you know?
You know, it's
Okay. Well, so it's the witness who has a responsibility to let you know if he or she doesn't know the answer or doesn't understand the question. So I have a practice pointer that you might want to consider because, you know, we were all taught by watching our adversaries that at the beginning of the deposition, we make a speech. Now, there is a series of rules that we're going to have in a deposition. So if you don't know the answer to the question, you're not supposed to tell me. And if you understand, or if I assume a fact and evidence incorrectly, you need to tell me that. And if you need clarification, you need to tell me that. And then blah, 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 blah. Will you follow those rules? Well, you know, you have no sound bite there. Because remember, you always have to think of that transcript in the sound bites in the deposition. And you already know what the nonsense objections are going to be. So just another way to do the identical thing is get agreements for the witness in little sound bites. Mr. Vaughn, will you tell me if you don't understand a question?
Yes.
I sure will. And if Mr. Vaughn, if it's confusing, will you let me know?
Absolutely.
And if I assume a fact incorrectly in the question, will you let us all know that?
I can do that.
And if you don't know the answer to the question, will you let us know?
Oh, of course I'll do that.
Do you think you can remember those rules?
Yeah, I went to college. I can do that.
Do you need to be reminded of any of those rules?
No. And I use this litany because of you now, and it's gold. But anyway.
It's beautiful because—
Oh, it's awesome. It's awesome.
So here's a video. You've just seen Jay and I practice it now in real time, you know?
Will you tell me if you don't understand my question?
Yes, I will.
Will you tell me if you find my questions to be confusing?
I will.
Will you tell me if I've assumed a fact incorrectly in one of my questions?
Yes, I will.
And if you don't know an answer to a question, will you tell me that?
Yes, I will.
Now, do you think you need to be reminded of these rules?
No, I do not.
They're pretty easy.
Yes, they are.
You see, now if you get to the brief for any one of those kinds of objections, you get a soundbite. The witness said they knew the rule. They said they didn't need to be reminded. There's no need to do it. So, you know, it's the same thing that you're doing with the litany of rules, but now you've got affirmative assertions from the witness that they understood the rule. And Cincinnati Serrano says that's what we're supposed to do. So that works. So we've taken care of some of those objections, and we got this concept of witness coaching. Certainly, like any team, you know, they get coached as they're getting ready to go. And that's our job as lawyers, to prepare the witnesses for a deposition that's coming. And that's their job, to prepare their witnesses for what's coming. But once the deposition starts, that's a whole different ballgame, because Hall versus Clifton told us in quotes, as the great Jay Vaughn said, the case will do the talking for you. Lawyers are strictly prohibited from making any comments which suggest or limit a witness's answer to an objectionable question. And, you know, there's different ways to do it. Let's start with a really just kind of, I can't even believe it happened, but in this business, I'm pretty much past the spot of thinking, I can't believe this happens. So let's imagine in your mind, if you will, a real situation where the plaintiff is deposing an expert via video and the defense lawyer happens to be in the room with the expert.